I'd like to call this meeting to order. Thank you very much for coming to the Stimson Center. This event is on the record. We are grateful to be able to host our two speakers. Senator Mushahid Syed is a frequent visitor to Washington. He has many hats, and he has played many roles in Pakistan's evolving strategic debate. An editor, a creator of think tanks, a cabinet minister, and a parliamentarian. And we at Stimson have noticed that parliamentary oversight on defense matters is getting stronger. More information is in the public domain, more questions are being asked. And I think a big reason for that is the guy to my right. Dr. Shezra Ali Khan is a newer parliamentarian. I think she has a very promising and new career ahead of her.
Yes, inshallah.
I presume it's safe to say that she is the only parliamentarian in Pakistan with a PhD in English literature from the University of Glasgow.
Absolutely.
And we'd love to see more parliamentarians like her in Islamabad. So these two speakers and other Pakistani speakers have been making the rounds in Washington. And they have spoken extensively about Kashmir. That is not a subject we can dismiss in this forum. But as I have told them, we think the primary value of having them here is to ask them questions on a range of subjects. In an informal panel format, I'll start. The Deputy Director of Stimson South Asia Program, Samir Lalwani, will ask a few questions too, and then he will entertain questions from the floor. Comments from the floor, we're not so interested in. Extensive comments from the floor, we're definitely not interested in. But we do want this session to be interactive. Sharp questions, hopefully concise answers. So those are our ground rules, and I hope that they will be respected. I'm going to ask the first question. So, big story in today's Dawn. The headline is, Act Against Militants or Face International Isolation. Civilians Tell Military. So this is inside information about a parliamentary all-parties conference that was held earlier this week, and in which this message was conveyed. My question to begin with is, Is this the right message? Do you agree with this message? Act against militants or face international isolation. Who wants to go first?
Okay, I can.
Yeah.
Get here.
You're on.
In the name of the Almighty, the Lord of all mankind, good afternoon, Assalamu alaikum. And thank you, Michael. Thank you, Samir, for honoring me and inviting us, Dr. Shazra and myself, on this occasion. I think, Michael, that there are no two views about that. We have already been going against the militants in a big way in probably what is the largest and the biggest inland war against terrorism, where 200,000 Pakistani troops are stationed on the Western Front and stamping out the scourge of terrorism which we have inherited from the Afghan war days. And I think it has been more successful than any other contemporary efforts against terrorism or extremism, including what the US tried to do and not quite succeeded in Afghanistan and Iraq. As you know, Pakistan is a very vibrant, pluralist, the freest democracy in the Muslim world, and we discuss things openly. Last year, when we had the crisis in Yemen, they asked for troops. The matter was referred by the government to the parliament, and we decided, I was one of those who drafted the resolution, in fact, that we will not send troops to Yemen. So there are different views. The leader of the opposition has spoken on that, others have spoken on that, and on that there is a certain consensus, and we have been going against the militants, and those remnants that have been left over, the government will certainly crack down on that. I don't know the veracity of the story because I'm not in Pakistan. This has come from Dawn, but there was this all-parties conference, and in terms of objectives, it's very, very clear that the struggle against militancy at all levels will continue. On isolation, right now, by the grace of God, Pakistan is not isolated. Let's take the Kashmir issue just briefly in the context. China, Iran, Turkey, the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries representing 57 nations, and the Human Rights Council, based in Geneva, for the first time have focused on that. And this morning, when General Peter Pavel, chairman of the military committee of NATO, met the Prime Minister of Pakistan in Islamabad, he even focused on Kashmir, that this issue has to be addressed. In fact, the best friend of the Indians for a long time, the Russian army, is, as we speak, are having joint military exercises in Pakistan on counterterrorism, and there was a visit yesterday by the Chief of Army Staff, General Rahil Sharif, to this joint exercises. So that shows a certain camaraderie, and the Iranian Navy is anchored in the waters of Karachi port. So Pakistan has this good focus in the region. And as far as the struggle against militancy is concerned, we consider terrorism and extremism, whether indigenous or externally sponsored, as the #1 security threat to Pakistan. And that has to be stamped out, and on that there's a complete consensus in the parliament, in the political forces, in the armed forces, and the government in all the provinces. And in the formulation of the National Action Plan, I was one of the persons who also drafted it. In 2016 December, and I would like to let you know that last week the government took a major initiative that under the Ministry of Interior, a new steering committee for countering violent extremism has been formed. I am going to be the chairman of that, and it's a 25-member committee which includes politicos, which includes academics, which includes journalists, which includes religious clerics from all denominations, and it includes retired generals and civil servants, which will also be taking this thing forward on counter-violent extremism and implementing the strategies that emerge.
Thank you. Dr. Shazra, do you want to add something to this?
Yes, I would just like to add that Pakistan at this point, we are against militancy, extremism. We have fought this war against terror. We do have this feeling that perhaps the huge sacrifices that Pakistan has made are not being recognized as much as they should be recognized by the US and by the international community, because no other country in the world has done as much against the war on terror. We have cleared Waziristan, we have cleared Karachi. So we have made huge steps forward, and we are continuing to do so. So definitely, we are against militancy. There's no question about that. Against terrorism, and but we do not fear isolation, as my respected colleague has explained.
Thank you. Just to follow up, Pakistan's credentials in countering the Pakistani Taliban are clear as day. Great pains and costs have been incurred in this campaign. But as you well know, the focus now is on violent extremist organizations that have found safe havens in Pakistan that direct their fire against neighboring states, not against the Pakistan army and the people of Pakistan. And so the question of the hour, at least in this country, is when Pakistan's security apparatus will see fit to expand this campaign against groups whose names are all too well known, even when they change their names. So that is the question. And when U.S. government officials and when NGOs have asked Pakistani colleagues, when will this happen? We hear that we have our hands full right now. But this campaign against the Pakistani Taliban seems to be winding down. And so then the question again arises. When's the right time?
Well, I'm glad you put the perspective correctly that Pakistan has waged one of the most difficult and one of the most successful and the biggest inland war against terrorism of any country since 9/11. And yes, there may be remnants. We have porous borders with Afghanistan. Like there are sanctuaries and safe havens for people like Mullah Fazlullah, the head of the TTP, in Afghanistan. And they still function from there in attacks. And but that is an aberration. And already we have seen that sometimes there's confusion in the policy emanating from Washington also. Till recently, Mr. Gulbuddin Hikmatyar was a bad terrorist, a warlord, and a war criminal. Today, he's kosher. He is part of the upcoming government in Kabul. And I'm sure the US will lift all the sanctions and all the bans against him because he's now, as like a good Catholic, he has confessed and he's joined joined. So that's fine. We also have in Islam, we call it Tawbah. We say we are sorry, Almighty, please forgive us my sins. But the only condition is I will never commit that crime or sin again. So I'm sure, after the conversion of this, in Pakistan also, you see, it's like saying a woman is half pregnant. The campaign against terrorism has to be comprehensive, has to be clear, and has to be all out. So there cannot be any oohs and ahs in that. It has to be absolutely clear. And if there are remnants, that's an aberration. It's not the norm. And you will see that being cleared sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Dr. Shazri, do you want to add?
No, I think this is fine.
The defense minister said after the Uri attack that he felt that this was actually an Indian attack against Indian Jawans to put pressure on Pakistan, to shift the narrative away from terrible developments in Kashmir. Do you agree with him? And do you think that statements like this coming from a cabinet minister help Pakistan's campaign to avoid diplomatic isolation?
Michael, you will recall that his counterpart in India is a gentleman called Manohar Parrikar. And he is on record as having said that we will use terrorism as a tool to destabilize Pakistan. And he is the defense minister of the Republic of India. So I think let's get the perspective right. And I would say that one thing is very clear. The attack did not emanate from Pakistan. So if it did not emanate from Pakistan because no evidence, no intelligence has been provided for that, then there can be either two options. If it emanated from India, either it's the homegrown militants fighting against the Indian army for the last couple of decades who did that. Because that area of Uri also is very difficult to cross. You see, even a bird cannot fly across because there are electronic fencing, there are double kind of fencing, there are even moats there, and they can't do that. Or it could be something else. So it's we are not sure unless somebody shares that with us. And I would suggest a way out is very simple. There's an organization called UNMOGIP, United Nations Military Observer Group in India and Pakistan, sanctioned by the United Nations resolution, resident in Muzaffarabad, resident in Rawalpindi, resident in Srinagar, and they have an office, by the way, because I met the Ghanaian Lieutenant General who's the boss, in Uri also. Why don't we ask them? They are neither Muslims nor Pakistanis, so there's no conflict of interest. Call them. They are there, that is their mandate. And let's decide once and for all who did it. Because Pakistan does not benefit from that. Pakistan has no incentive for that. At a time when there's a popular, spontaneous, widespread and indigenous uprising after the martyrdom of Burhan Wani on July 8, and as my good friend Rajmohan Gandhi, whom you know very well, he wrote in the Hindu on September 18 that there is a de facto plebiscite among the Kashmiris. It's an uprising, and nobody's accused Pakistan of being involved in that. So given that context, let there be, and we have faith in the United States military also. Let the Pentagon come in. Let them investigate. Let your DIA, CIA, or NSA investigate. There are so many. You have 16 intelligence agencies. Let's come with the smoking gun. Who did it?
I don't want to dwell on the need for intelligence reform in this country.
Okay, that's it.
Dr. Shezra, I have a question for you. And it's a hard question for me to even ask because there is so much pain and suffering in this world. The fighting in Yemen, which Pakistan declined to participate in, has yielded about 4,000 fatalities so far. The fighting in Sudan, South Sudan, hard to estimate. The best estimates we've got are at least 50,000 fatalities. Could be way more. Syria. Oh my God. Over 400,000 fatalities. Children being targeted. Not by buckshot, but by barrel bombs, chemical weapons. The world we live in is a brutal place. And things aren't so good in Kashmir either. But compared to these other places, what's happening in Kashmir is not good, but it's modest by comparison. So, why? When it's so hard for the United States, to my embarrassment, to get involved in a more helpful way in Syria, why should the United States listen to the argument to get more involved in Kashmir?
Well, there are two aspects to the answer to this question. First is, as you've rightly pointed out, the world is a terrible place. Terrible atrocities are happening all over the world. In Kashmir also, the latest uprising is not the only uprising. This has been going on for the last 60 plus years, and the terrible atrocities that are happening now are just an outcome also of what's been happening. You know that in 2010, the lawyer called Parvez Imroz, these are well documented facts. Mass graves were found in Kashmir in more than 1,000 sites. And there are considered to be more than 10,000 people buried in those mass graves. They haven't been found. No identity has yet been found. India has refused to be, and these things are not unearthed or are not shown as much on the international media, because India does not allow any independent observers to come into Kashmir and to document those facts. And even the people who try to document them are tortured and killed. So this latest uprising happened because Burhan Wani, the extrajudicial murder of Burhan Wani, who was just, as I was reading somewhere, his fight for freedom was a symbolic war. He was just posting pictures on Facebook and on the social media about the call for freedom that the youth of Kashmir were asking, which is their fundamental right and enshrined in the United Nations resolutions of 1948 and 49, which India itself invoked the United Nations under Chapter 6, Pacific Resolution of Disputes. And so the United States, not only as, I think, traditionally a defender of human rights violations all over the world, we request the United States to intervene because it has leverage with India to allow negotiations to start to end human rights violations in Kashmir, to make sure that the United Nations resolutions are implemented. And secondly, as the United States, as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, also should intervene and make sure that the Kashmiri people the Kashmiri people themselves feel that they are invisible to the world, perhaps. We have talked to Kashmiri people, we've talked to doctors who have visited Kashmiri people, and the only thing that they want is their right, the fundamental right to choose their own destiny.
Thank you. Samir, you got some questions too.
I do. So thank you again both for coming and joining us today. I actually wanted to pivot a little bit to the discussion of China. Mr. Senator, you've been one of the leading experts in Pakistan on China and the Pakistani-China relationship. China, from what I've read, is a stalwart ally of Pakistan, historically speaking. But even stalwart allies oftentimes have friction points. I think to myself, the United States and the UK have been some of the closest of allies, and yet they clashed a number of times, most notably during the Suez Crisis in 1956, almost came to a military clash. So I'm wondering, what are the potential friction points between Pakistan and China? What are the areas where there are challenges in that relationship?
Thank you. As you know, that I'm also chair of the Parliamentary Committee on the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, and I've been visiting China since I was a teenager, so which I've made over 50 or 60 visits to China in the last 40 years.
It's a lot of miles.
Before the frequent flyer miles age. Just one point that you mentioned, the friction between the UK and USA. The latest point of friction between London and Washington was China. When the US did not want China to join the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the British bolted. Being good businessmen, they rejected the advice of Washington, and they joined the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is a major Chinese initiative, along with Germany, along with Italy, along with Spain, and et cetera, et cetera, et
India
cetera.
too, I believe.
India, of course. India was very much in the front of the queue,
Right.
after Pakistan. So I think We do not have any points. This is a very unique, special relationship. As a student of international relationship, I have never seen such a relationship, which is almost a model of good neighborly cooperation. That there is a virtual absence of any friction, because there is no conflict of interest between China and Pakistan. Pakistan supports China on all its core interests. What are the core interests of China? Number one, the territorial integrity and unity of China. That's number one. Now, that's my own reading. There's not listed in a textbook. Number two, I would reckon the role of the Communist Party of China as the predominant factor in the Chinese political system, right? Number three, I would say the core interest of China would be China's development, China's peaceful rise, China's transition which China is making today from a regional to a global power. That will be a core interest. Number four, Taiwan. Number five, Tibet. Number six, Xinjiang. And number seven, South China Sea. These are the core interests. What are our core interests? The unity and territorial integrity, obviously. Kashmir. Economic development of the people. Relations with India and peace in Afghanistan. I would reckon these are the core interests of. On both these core interests of China, Pakistan fully supports them. The only country in the world which fully supports China. And on the core interests of Pakistan, China also unreservedly supports Pakistan. So that is the basis of the camaraderie, which began in 1962 after the Sino-Indian War as the enemy of my enemy is my best friend. But from defense, diplomacy, it has evolved into a larger relationship, which now, in today's world, as we speak, in the context of the initiative of President Xi Jinping on One Belt, One Road, which includes 65 countries in Asia, Middle East, Africa, and Europe, uniting them in a common quest for a better tomorrow through economic cooperation, energy cooperation, ports, pipelines, roads, rail links. And the centerpiece of that is the China-Pakistan corridor. Because the belt, the Silk Road economic belt, is the revival of the land route. And the road is the maritime Silk Road, the ports, and that's the Gwadar port. So the two converge, the belt and the road only converge in one country of the 65 countries. That's Pakistan. So that's why CPEC, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, is the centerpiece, the flagship, the pilot project. And also in the context of a changing world, where we have seen that there are new evolutions. Don't forget the context was 2011, when two important developments, I think, were pivotal. One was Hillary Clinton's announcement in July 2011 in Chennai about the new Silk Road. You remember? She talked of a new Silk Road from India, when the Silk Road is only one Silk Road that historically existed. And the second one was the November 2011 announcement of President Barack Hussein Obama on the pivot to Asia. So that gave a certain perspective of the emerging Asian vision of Washington in the aftermath of the failed and flawed tested strategies in Iraq, Afghanistan, the Middle East. Obama gave up on the Muslim world and the military, and he said, let's pivot to Asia. So then, of course, you can see after that, China, for the first time, moved into Afghanistan on a security and diplomatic platform when they had a high-level visit. And Pakistan had always been saying China should be involved in that. And finally, I'd like to also say that we also see in Pakistan the emergence of what I would call a greater South Asia. South Asian subcontinent, of course, includes Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, and the Maldives. But when a greater South Asia is a region which is a geo-economic entity woven together by this economic and regional cooperation, which includes China, Iran, Afghanistan, Myanmar, the Central Asian republics of Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan. So, and that is where all these pipelines are being there, the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India pipeline, the Iran-Pakistan pipeline. There's talk of a Qatar pipeline, then there's a pipeline from Uzbekistan to China. In fact, Samir, there's so much talk of pipelines that people say there will be a Pipelinistan in the region. Because, so it's the whole world is being transformed. And that's a very positive development. Regional cooperation driven by economy, energy, and Pakistan is a pivot in that. We're a key player. And by the way, this year, at a very major development, India and Pakistan both joined the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So I see the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, as the institutional future of Greater South Asia after Mr. Modi's decision to preside over the slow motion demise of SAARC by sabotaging the recent summit in Pakistan.
So you brought up CPEC, and I'm wondering, there have been news accounts in recent days, in fact, in Pakistani papers, raising questions about some of the terms of CPEC, whether they're disclosed or uncertain, potentially floating rates in terms of lending rates, high demands for security, costs being passed on to consumers. Are those concerns? Do you hold any of those concerns? Are they raised by other legislators or within the political debate in Pakistan?
You see, it's a very major project. When Mr. Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, came to Pakistan in December 2015 for the Heart of Asia conference, he said that this CPEC is the largest comprehensive project between any two countries in the history of international relations. It's huge, $46 billion spread over 15 years from 2015 to 2030, having four key components: energy, infrastructure, Gawada port, and special economic zones. So it's huge. So obviously it's just started off. What people are saying is that if there's something good, they want a bigger slice of the cake. They want a bigger share, whether it's provinces and other areas, and it's an evolving situation, and I'm sure a lot of the hiccups will be resolved. As it is, there are about 18 projects which are called early harvest projects, which are supposed to be completed by 2018, and I would say that 40 to 50% are on track. In the areas of energy, when they are completed, about 10,000 megawatts of electricity will be generated additionally, which will alleviate Pakistan's energy crisis. And that means wind and solar energy, hydro, and for the first time through coal also, because we have huge coal mines in the province of Sindh.
I think there was one recent report, though, was talking about the energy projects are on track, but the transmission lines are still uncertain, and that was going to be the problem of delivering energy. You
see, Pakistan has inherited a system like India, like Sri Lanka, like Bangladesh, thanks to the British, which is the most efficient but the most slow-moving bureaucracy in the world. The bureaucratic red tape in our South Asia, whether it's India or Pakistan or Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, because we are all from the same stock. I mean, historically that is, so to speak. So that sometimes the left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And the bureaucracy is a very powerful factor because that's been the base of the old colonial era. So they are getting used to working at a faster pace. And those are those kind of problems. There are hiccups. There are those kind of issues. But they are not substantive issues that can be a roadblock to the implementation and success of CPEC.
So let's turn a little bit to the West. Sorry, my geography was confused for a second. You had made some points about the great strides that Pakistan has made against militancy in its extensive military operations against the Taliban. But across the border in Afghanistan, it sounds like things are not going so well. The government seems to be constantly on the verge of a crisis. The Taliban seems to be making gains in Afghanistan. So I guess I'm wondering, are there concerns about any negative spillovers from Afghanistan undermining the gains that Pakistan has made over the last few years? And then what is the ideal outcome for Pakistan in Afghanistan? What can they do to achieve that?
Let's be very frank, Samir. I was really shocked when I read the front page of the New York Times today. The decision in Brussels to force poor Afghan refugees away from Europe, push them into the war zone of Afghanistan, which is a violation of international conventions, is, I think, almost shameful. We in Pakistan have been hosting 3 million Afghan refugees, the longest and the largest refugee population in human history, in a largely friction-free relationship, without international support. We are not cribbing or crying about that. Yes, we have problems, but we don't push people into a war zone. The Europeans, the aid consortium has linked the return of at least 50-60% of those refugees, and they have 176,000, so that means about 80,000. Where will they go? Won't they? You talk of spillover. You think they'll go back to Afghanistan? No way. They'll come to Pakistan. They'll come to maybe other places. I hope Indian friends are also open to receiving them. They were large territories. But these are the kind of follies, short-sighted decisions, I would even use the word amoral decisions against humanity. If Europe is unwilling to host those people, like we, a poor country, are hosting them. You talked of Syria. I was talking to the Lebanese leadership recently. It's a population of 4 million, and they have 2 million Syrian refugees. And they don't even whine about it. They don't even talk about it. They don't even crib about it. So I think let's get the perspective right. If you are creating more problems because of political considerations, because of the politics of Europe, where there's a rise of right-wing racism and xenophobia, Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, I'm sorry to say, that's happening in those countries. It is something very reprehensible and regrettable, and that is detrimental to peace, security, and stability in our part of the world. Already, the Turkish leadership has said that we are no more interested in the European Union. So I think that's why you have Brexit, and that's why you have the Europeans. If you are going to take such decisions at a conference where you have this bazari haggling, it's like a bazaar haggling, you know. Okay, take the $3.7 billion for the next 4 years and get these Afghan people returned. I think I was shocked, and I saw it in the New York Times front page today. So it's a violation of all acceptable humanitarian conventions.
It's absolutely disappointing.
And what will happen to us?
Well, that's the question, though.
Or Iran. So you can see.
But my question is...
You think they'll go back to Afghanistan? Let's be very clear.
No, you're making the exact point that I'm curious
so
about.
It will destabilize the region. It will complicate our problems. It will expand our problems.
Okay.
And that's what's going to happen. And then we are holding the baby with the bathwater, and then we are accused, oh, you are the bad guys and we have the thing. When we have not these are we are facing the consequences of bad policies and bad actions made maybe in London, Brussels, or Washington. These are not our decisions.
Fair enough, but is there anything that Pakistan can do to mitigate some of those
yes,
effects?
We are very clear. Afghanistan and Pakistan's destiny is inextricably intertwined. Absolutely. The enemies of Afghanistan are the enemies of Pakistan. And the enemies of Pakistan are the enemies of Afghanistan. This has been stated. Our military, our intelligence, our government has been doing that. I myself organized the first parliamentary security dialogue between Kabul and Islamabad. The Parliament of Afghanistan, the Parliament of Pakistan. First ever parliamentary security dialogue. And in fact, before that also, I was one of the few ones who opposed the policy of strategic depth when I was a journalist. And as a journalist, I flew to Kabul to interview General Najibullah. I was the first Pakistani journalist in the days of the Soviet occupation. And I told General Zia also those days that ultimately there'll be a deal between Gorbachev and Reagan, and they won't even look back what's happening. And then you can see Charlie Wilson's war, what happened.
I'm waiting for your memoir.
Oh my God, it's too explosive. Have to be after my lifetime because I know too much.
Well, standing invitation to write them when you're
Oh, thank you. Okay, maybe I can have a 3-month stint. And she is a very highly qualified researcher.
Absolutely.
If you also pay for her, then I'm willing.
So why don't we open it up to the audience for Q&A? And again, I'll remind you what Michael said, which is let's have the questions in the form of questions and not in the form of statements. So I'll start from Dave over here.
David Smith, I'm a former military actor.
Colonel David Smith, sir. A good friend of Pakistan and an old friend. Welcome, sir.
Sir, you might not recall, but the last time we had a private conversation was about 10 years ago, and the subject was Baluchistan. This was in the aftermath of the death of Mr. Bugti and I believe you had just led a parliamentary
Yes.
delegation to the province. And I recognize that there have been some constitutional arrangements between the center and the provinces since then, but I guess I would like to get your just general view of where we are or where Balochistan is 10 years later.
And thank you for reminding. That was the Parliamentary Committee on Balochistan, which I headed, at which included all the political parties of Pakistan, including the Baloch and Pashtun nationalist parties of Balochistan. And that report is still the most comprehensive document on the way forward. And since then, a lot has happened. I would say that three aspects are very important. Number one, under the 18th Amendment of the Pakistan Constitution, which was implemented in 2011, the financial autonomy of the provinces is gone manifold, which means a lot of money which went to the federal government is now being pumped into the provinces, particularly the province of Balochistan. For example, every member of the Balochistan Parliament or the State Assembly gets a hefty development fund for development in the area. That's number one. It's a plus. Number two, the plus is CPEC, Gwadar Port, which people talked about for a long time. And I remember reading an article in the Atlantic Monthly, which is published from Washington, by Robert Kaplan, who wrote the book Revenge of Geography. And that article was in May 2009. And he said, after his visit to Gwadar, this is before CPEC, before the One Belt, he said Gwadar has the potential to be the hub of a new Silk Road. And he called Gwadar the Rotterdam of the Arabian Sea. That's the quote unquote of Robert Kaplan. And that will link landlocked Central Asia. He talked of Samarkand, he talked of Dushanbe, he talked of Astana, he talked of Ashgabat, he talked of all these Bishkek with going through Gwadar. So that's, I think, Balochistan is now opening big time. New roads, new construction, linkages, rail links, and Gwadar is now going to have an international airport where, Dave, next time you come on an A380, you can land in Gwadar in 2 years' time, God willing, inshallah. So that's the second plus. The third plus, in my view, and that's a bit unconventional, the Iran-American nuclear deal. Because the US now would not have any incentive in containing Iran, in destabilizing Iran, and they would like a stable Iran because of that. And that stability, and that would also lead to have a good effect on Pakistan's province of Balochistan, because we share the province of Balochistan. And President Rouhani, when he met Mr. Nawaz Sharif on 22nd September in New York, he said for the first time, the security of Pakistan is the security of Iran, and Chabahar port of Iran and Gwadar are sister ports. And this was after Mr. Modi's reference to Balochistan, because the Iranians got worried. They are very, very sensitive about those, their old fault lines, ethnic or otherwise. And they said, no, we are with Pakistan in ensuring that everything remains stable. So these are other pluses. And for the first time, we have a governor who represents a Pashtun nationalist party, Mr. Achakzai's party, which was totally out of the system. We have a Baloch nationalist party, the National Party, which has representation. Till recently, they had a chief minister, and now they had alternate with the Muslim League chief minister. So I think that it's become a more inclusive political system. But of course, a lot needs to be done because it's been there. So I think that the glass, I would say, is half full in terms of Balochistan. And I see better prospects. And we hope the United States would also play that role. I'm planning to have a conference in Gwadar, and I welcome you to visit Gwadar. And it's the best seafood you can find in the region.
Karen, do you have a question?
So I have three, Karen Pervez from the Foreign Service Institute. So I have three very precise questions. Very precise, super precise.
We're timing you.
Okay, so the first one is, so the progress that was made in 2006, 2007 with respect to Kashmir and finding a resolution between India and Pakistan, do you see any hope of reviving that, or do you see any room within that particular plan for the current situation? The second question is, you referred to the Committee on CVE, and I'm just curious about how you both see, I guess, what is your hope for that in terms of what you want to achieve with it and the scope in terms of the areas that you'll be focused on? And the third one is only because the last statement you said, Rashad Saab, was Afghanistan's enemies are also Pakistan's enemies. So are Afghanistan's friends also Pakistan's friends, and you know where that's going.
No, I just talked to the enemies. I didn't talk to the friends.
But I'm just
Okay. Point number one. I was in the talks with Mr. Manmohan Singh, the 3-hour meeting in New York. We were sitting across the table. Manmohan Singh was surrounded by 2 sulking hawks. They never smiled. One was K.R. Narayanan, the former head of RAW, and the National Security Advisor. The other one was Natwar Singh, your friend, and he was the foreign minister. And they were glum and serious. General Musharraf was there, I was there, the foreign minister was there, and I think the current ambassador, who Jilani, he was the DG South, he was there. And we were saying, and then there was the press conference. It was a very longish dinner. And then a situation came that we said, there's no breakthrough coming. And I could feel literally Manmohan Singh being held by the sleeves by these 2 hawks. Psychologically, that is, not physically. And he was, because we said we should visit Pakistan, your villages in Pakistan, province of Punjab. And then when he said, I have to take a break in the washroom. So I followed him to the washroom. Yeah, because it was a large WC men's room. So I spoke to him in Punjabi then. I said, sir, there's going to be a press conference. The press is waiting. Seema, were you there? No, you weren't. So there was a large contingent of Indians and Pakistanis, and they were waiting, with bated breath. Why this long dinner, Because Manmohan Singh is a man of few words, and spending 3 hours in a room with the Pakistanis was a bit. So I said, sir, we have to make an announcement. I said, you should announce that I am willing to visit Pakistan at a mutually convenient date. He said, I can't do that right now. I said, sir, you have to. I spoke to him in Punjabi, I said, you must do something. Kuch to karna hai, karo na. He said, you want me to lose my job? So it was that kind of fear. So unfortunately, Musharraf went the extra mile. He went even beyond the stated position. And I think they always said the military is an impediment. The military was on board. They wanted a peace deal. They wanted an outreach on Kashmir. The mother of all deals could have been clinched had Manmohan not blinked. He blinked, unfortunately. And not only he blinked on that, he blinked on another thing, Siachen. We said, okay, let's go for the low-hanging fruit, Siachen. He said, let me check from the army in Delhi. And it's not the Prime Minister of Pakistan speaking, it's the Prime Minister of India speaking. The army vetoed it. The second time the army has vetoed a Siachen deal, and Michael, who knows it better than you do? 1989, Rajiv Gandhi and Benazir Bhutto, in their meeting in July 1989 in Islamabad, had agreed for the deal. But Mr. Rajiv Gandhi went back. The army said no. Because they said we are in an advantageous position and so forth. So it's a very sorry. Yes, now you said, I feel Mr. Modi is an outsider to the Delhi establishment. And I hope the traditional Delhi Walas who have been dominating in South Block and North Block will not hold him by the sleeve. Because he doesn't come from a family of rich daddies or granddaddies or a big establishment. He's a self-made man. And he can spring a surprise also. He's unpredictable. So if he can have that, what I call, and I'm a great fan of President Richard Milhouse Nixon, he can have a Nixonian transformation and outreach to Pakistan. I think the destiny of 1/5 of humanity will change. And what should he do? Okay, if you ask me if I was his national security advisor, I would suggest 3 things. A, resume the back channel between Pakistan and India. B, have CBMs on Kashmir. End the killings, end the human rights. It's a human problem. It's not about territorial real estate. It's about the brave and oppressed people of Kashmir. And C, the SARC summit has been scuttled, courtesy Mr. Modi. But under the SARC rules, the SARC summit has to be held by the host country at a mutually agreed new date. It has to be held in Pakistan. So he should give a wink and a nod to Mr. Nawaz Sharif. That yes, let us have that. On 20th of January 2017, there will be a new president of the United States of America, a new administration. So I think this is a very opportune moment. In 2019, Mr. Modi will be fighting for re-election. So let 2017 be the year of decision, the year of peace for South Asia. The ball is in Modi's court.
Let me just interrupt. And you've given us 3 things that Modi can do
Yes.
to improve the atmospherics.
You said what can be done to revive that? To be the new Nixon,
So
the South
what-
Asian Nixon.
Got it. What are the 3 things Pakistan can do to improve the atmospherics?
Pakistan is willing, ready, and able to go the extra mile. We have unconditional things, whether you talk to us bilaterally. Let's start talking across the table. And everything should be on the table. Any issue. If you can't do it bilaterally, do it regionally, but you have scuttled SAARC. Do it internationally, but you have scuttled the UN. So, you talk to Modi, Michael. You're a peacemaker of sorts. I remember once upon a time you were very active in the 20th century, and even the 21st century you can play a role. And I think
I can attest he's still quite active.
yeah, I know that because I've known him for the last 20 years, and he's a peerless and ageless since those periods. So I think that's important. If we can't do it ourselves, I think South Asia has some of the most brilliant brains, human resources, some of the best and the brightest in the third world. They come from South Asia. There's so much human resource. Akbar Khwaja, my friend, he's in the World Bank. He was my colleague in the Punjab University till we both got thrown out together because we were both leftists in the period of General Ziaul Haq. And he came to the World Bank and I stayed back. And you can see there are others also like that who are outstanding. So why the hell can't we do that? Why can't we take the bull by the horns? You are there sitting there in the State Department. You tell them to get moving, get cracking, and be the interlocutor.
But you just
be the
suggested
bridge.
CBMs that Modi can do. Are there any CBMs that Pakistan can do?
Whatever they ask us, we are ready to do. That the Indians will ask us, you see. And on CBE, I've convened a meeting of the steering committee, which I'm heading. It's a 25-member committee on counter-violent extremism, and the meeting is on 18th of October. So I'll be holding it the first meeting, and if you have any ideas, the highest paid person in Hollywood is the idea woman or idea man. And if he or she gives an idea, the movie is a big success, please give me the ideas. I'd love to have them.
So, sir, you've been very patient.
Yes. Yesterday, I was saying to you that I don't want to see the part of the problem, part of the solution. You suggest 3 solutions, but I suggest you 3 solutions too on the Pakistan side.
On Pakistan-India relations?
On overall relation, because Kashmir is not problem, Pakistan is the problem, frankly speaking. Separate the religion from the state, number 1. Number 2, interference of the Pakistani military in politics. There is no democracy in Pakistan, it is a controlled democracy. Number 3, give the national rights to the Baloch, Sindhi and Pashtun people. And for other question, a question I want to ask you, sir. Saudi Arabia gave to the Mr. Modi highest civilian award. They have good relationship. Afghanistan is very happy from the India. Even Gulf countries are very happy from the India. You are saying that the Iran and India's relation, they have a good relationship. And again, you are depending previously on America. Now you are going to depending on the China. I would suggest better to depend on your own resources. Think inside. If you are continuously depending on the outside, the $46 billion or American money, you will never solve your problem, sir.
So why don't we take that as a question and say, are there things that Pakistan can do for its own growth internally?
Dr. Shezer, you are very involved in the parliament on building up domestic resources, capabilities. What do you see as the number 1 priority?
In the present government, the Prime Minister's Vision 2050, it's aligned with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And so the number 1 priority is, the Prime Minister in his speech today said, in answer to Mr. Modi's speech, where he said that now we should be fighting poverty in the world. And the Prime Minister said that to fight poverty, we cannot use guns and we cannot use mortar. We have to first solve the issue of Kashmir. We first have to have peace in the region, and then only can we fight poverty, and then only can all these problems that our region is facing can be alleviated. So our core issue at this time is Kashmir, and no peace can prevail in the region if this issue is not solved. It is an international dispute. It is not an internal problem, and the stakes are very high now. We are nuclear neighbors, and so we need to have peace on the issue of Kashmir, and then the rest of the things can be solved.
Verghese, can I trust you'll ask a question as a question?
I have no comments. So, my name is Verghese George. I'm a Hindu.
The Hindu Delhi?
No, I'm based here for the Hindu.
The Hindu newspaper?
The Indian newspaper.
Oh, of course. So I knew Mr. N. Ram very well, and Malini Parthasarthi.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of my op-eds have appeared in the Hindu and the Frontline magazine.
So the question is, so you said the Indians should ask what they want. There's a couple of things Indians have been asking, very recent past. In fact, the Dawn newspaper report also mentions that, today's report. One is Mumbai trials. The second is that Indian initiated move at the United Nations to have the Jaish-e-Mohammed chief declared as designated as a terrorist. In both these instances, the latter one, Pakistan proactively blocked that move for the last 7-8 months. I mean, one cannot understand what is Pakistan's objective or what are you trying to achieve from that, and what would you do with the Mumbai trials to inspire some confidence?
Pakistan's legal process is already moving on that. And you know, today, by the grace of God, Pakistan has one of the most independent and vibrant judiciaries. And we are waiting for some evidence which was not provided by the Indian side. And we are moving on that. You have seen the news reports also on that. Regarding the Jaish-e-Mohammed thing, you see, it takes two to tango. If India is now planning to host separatists from Pakistan, who have also been involved in killing of people, and India is naming the province of Balochistan by the level of the Prime Minister, what would happen if Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif started talking of Khalistan, Nagaland, Tripura, Assam, Sikkim? Or the Maoist insurgency, which is the Red Corridor, which has 20 out of 29 provinces of India, and it's engulfed in that, and 200 out of 600 districts of India. We don't want to do that, because that's interference in the internal affairs of a neighboring country. You're changing the rules of the game. And then it becomes tit for tat. We live in the 21st century. Do we want to get involved in a debilitating proxy war, which will only be detrimental to the peoples of South Asia? So let's not do that. Let's not hark back to a Cold War mentality of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Let's try to build a better tomorrow on rules of the game which are applicable to all. I think everything should be on the table. Let the Nixonian transposition of Mr. Modi take place. We would warmly welcome that. We can have talks in Islamabad, in Delhi, or Dubai, or Bangkok, or wherever, as it happened in the past.
Can I just also add to that? It's this game of accusing each other and bringing up these things. Pakistan can also talk about the Samjhauta Express, in which so many people were killed, and nothing has been done about that as yet. So I'd like to remind you of your own Premier Vajpayee, who said that Pakistan and India now need to accept each other as entities, as neighbors. Neighbors cannot be changed. We are going to be each other's neighbors, and so we must accept each other, and through that acceptance then try to build more friendly relationships. Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif has offered peace talks without any preconditions at all. But it has been constantly and consistently being rejected by India. So let's move forward. This is the way to move forward, is negotiations, to talk, to bring we are ready to talk on any subject. It is India that says that they only want to talk about one subject. We are ready to talk on that subject, as well as other subjects, as well as the international dispute of Kashmir and other subjects that might arise.
Well, it's a very quick, 30 seconds.
Quick.
Yeah. So I don't think we're disputing whether there should be talks or not. On the question of Masood Azhar, is that a question of dispute at all? Is there a dispute about the fact that he is indeed a terrorist?
We would say that give us all the evidence that you have about Mr. Masood Azhar, since he was once a prisoner in India, if you remember. And then there was a hijacking of the plane in December 1999. And let's discuss that. And let's exchange those lists.
Good.
Yashwant from Hindustan Times. You referred to this being a nuclear neighborhood and we should be more careful. And in between the Uri attacks and the so-called surgical strike that India carried out in Pakistan, there was talk in Pakistan about the use of nuclear weapons to keep. I mean, the defense minister talked about finishing and destroying India with they have to get away from that. India has a no first use policy, which Pakistan has steadfastly refused to do on its own, not follow it, but do on its own. Do you think Pakistan needs to make some kind of move, and not CBM, on this issue of nuclear? You've just even thought of the threat of using nuclear weapons in a neighborhood such as that. Do you condone that? Do you endorse that? And do you think political leaders ought to be more careful with this kind of rhetoric? And both of you, the question is to both of you.
In his offer for the talks, the Prime Minister has specifically also mentioned that he would be ready to talk on the nuclear question as well. So yes, we are ready. We are ready to talk on any question, as I said, and we certainly would not condone the use of this nuclear weapons. You know, after the Uri attack, India is the one which has been trying to hype up this war mongering and this create this hype about war with surgical strikes that have not been proved. They have shown no proof of the surgical, but just this war mongering, which I don't think is a very a sensible thing to do, because we need at this point to come to the negotiating table. Kashmir is definitely a core issue between India and Pakistan. We need to discuss that, and all other issues we are ready to discuss as well.
And I would say that ever since India injected the nuclear factor in South Asia, the original sin was committed by the Indian side. In 1974, when the nuclear test Pokhran started, Pakistan has been offering repeatedly, consistently, to have some nuclear rules of the game. And thank God that we have one agreement. There are two agreements of Pakistan and India which are most long-standing. One is the Indus Waters Treaty, signed under World Bank auspices in 1960. The second one is, and I played a role in that as a journalist, was the December 1985 agreement in Delhi, non-attack on nuclear installations and exchange of lists on 1st January. Because I had gone to India as editor of the Muslim before that, and so forth. So I think this is very important. India and Pakistan are some of the most sophisticated and advanced societies in the world in terms of knowledge, learning, history, heritage. And I think we are more responsible as nuclear weapon states than anybody else. So I think that nobody should brandish the threat of war or jingoism or any kind of conventional or nuclear sword. So we feel that we are ready for any discussions on the basis of equality and strict reciprocity on the nuclear issue vis-a-vis India, because there is the regional dimension. India went nuclear for its status, we went nuclear for our security. So I think that those concerns on both sides should be married together in a compromise.
Sir?
Good afternoon, sir. Nissim Rubin from the American Jewish Committee. Sir, I've been hearing you both and respectfully. You mentioned the emphasis on bilateral talks between India and Pakistan, which is very important. And just to quote Prime Minister Netanyahu recently at the United Nations, where he said that the road to peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians runs through Ramallah and Jerusalem, not through New York, Washington, or Geneva. In that context, even it could be said that the road to peace runs from Islamabad to New Delhi, so close by, and not via Washington, New York, or Geneva. So we see a parallel in that case, and to help resolve because we have seen the example that the international community at a point becomes indifferent to the problem. So some thoughts on that, sir?
Mr. Rubin, thank you for coming. And I mentioned the American Jewish Committee, and I mentioned the movie also, Schindler's List. The last scene of Schindler's List, what does he say? He says, according to the Torah, which is a holy book, and because you are also people of the book, according to the Islamic faith, killing one person is like killing humanity. Saving one life is like saving humanity. The exact formulation precisely is found in the Holy Quran, which we inherited from our Semitic brothers. So I would say, paraphrase, that the road to peace in Kabul lies through Kashmir. So that includes Delhi and Islamabad. The road to peace in Kabul lies in Kashmir, in the sense that when we talk of peace, you cannot compartmentalize peace. You cannot segregate a section. Okay, no, we can have peace in Kabul, but let Kashmir burn. That ain't gonna happen. So you talk of a comprehensive peace settlement. So let the people of South Asia not be hostage to the hostility of the past, and let them move forward. And as I told you, I read a lot of Israeli newspapers. I read the Haaretz regularly. I read the Jerusalem Post regularly. And when I was a student in Georgetown, I had very close friendship with my Steve Rosen, Jim Kahn, etc., etc. So, and I said to you, I've also danced on the Hava Nagila, and all those Hanukkah holidays. So I think it's very important. And if you have any other experiences of peace building, bridge building, interfaith harmony, let's do that. Not just among the Abrahamic faiths, but also among Sikhism, Hinduism, other Buddhism. Because this is a very inclusive world. You can't make new lines as cleavages, as fault lines on the basis of race or religion, which is happening in parts of Europe, unfortunately.
Parts here.
Can I just add to that? You're saying that bilateral talks should happen between India and Pakistan, and at some point the international community. But we, Pakistan, will continue to try to shake the collective conscience of the international community, and we would want the United Nations as well as the United States, as a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, to intervene and to try to pressurize India to at least come to the table and accept our offer of talks. Bilateral talks between India and Pakistan have unfortunately not really worked out well, despite the Simla agreement, despite the Lahore agreement later on. And so we do feel that we need a intervention from a person with international authority to be able to persuade India to come to the negotiating table with the Kashmiris. The Kashmiris have a stake in this. This is not just between India and Pakistan. This is a tripartite discussion that we would like to initiate, and the Kashmiris need to have a say in this as well.
So that's a very noble goal, but do you see realistically any appetite for this in the international community?
There does seem to be a sort of inertia in the international community as far as the question is Kashmir is concerned. As I said, because perhaps it has not been as well documented, and not the terrible atrocities that have been happening in Kashmir for the last 60 years have not come to the notice of the international community. This is what we are trying to do now, and more importantly, this is what the Kashmiri people themselves are trying to do now. They are ready to now they do not want to accept the status quo anymore. They do not want to continue this repression anymore. So they are coming to the international, they are raising their voice through the international media. So hopefully things will change.
So we have time for a final set of questions. So we'll collect all of them and we'll try to go through them. Give the speakers a final closing response. So let's just go down the line here and start.
Thank you. Can you also give us a brief description about your meetings in DC? You want to know what kind of responses you received from
I'm supposed to give you a separate interview on that, so I'll give it to you.
Okay. Sir.
Yeah, my name is Ken Meyercourt. One of the mysteries of our war on terror is why 5 years after the killing of Osama bin Laden, his successor, Mr. Zawahiri, is still alive. Is Pakistan willing to tell us where he is?
We have no idea. You have better intelligence than us. You have 16 intelligence agencies, including the National Security Agency, and if you tell us where he is, we'll certainly locate and get him out. But we have no idea at all.
And Osama bin Laden too, you didn't know?
If the US was found napping on 9/11, when such a huge attack which was planned for months took place in the heart of the Pentagon, in the heart of New York, and none of your intelligence agencies could figure out or anticipate the attack, so our intelligence agencies are not as well funded as yours. So if you can fail, so can we. The US, for example, failed to anticipate the Indian nuclear tests in 1998, which we had forewarned our American friends that it's in the offing. So there are intelligence failings at that. But we work as partners. And I think the partnership between the US and Pakistan on counterterrorism worked very well till the US took the eye off the ball and went into Iraq without stabilizing Afghanistan.
So, I'm going to have to call this meeting to a halt. The reason is that Mushahid has kindly agreed to be taped for a free online course that the Stimson Center has on nuclear South Asia. It's a course where we have over 70 experts from the United States, India, and Pakistan trying to help with nuclear learning. We don't have axes to grind. We have many perspectives. And we got to take advantage of his presence here.
I'll contribute to your confusion as best as I can.
I do want to thank Dr. Shezra.
She's the rising star of the ruling party. Keep an eye on her.
I want to thank Mushahid, who is the chairman of every parliamentary committee that has ever been formed.
Life chairman. Thank you.
And we appreciate the role of the parliament in Pakistan.
Yes, that's very important on national security.
On national security. So join me, please.